The great conclave chamber of concordance was a void carved from the heart of a dead star, its walls lined with shimmering fields of captive chronotons that displayed the galaxy in a slow, majestic spiral. Here, silence was a physical presence, a weight of history and power that pressed down upon the delegates. For centuries, this chamber had been a sanctuary of reason, a place where empires settled their disputes not with plasma and gravitic shear, but with measured words and binding accords. Tonight, however, the silence was a brittle thing, stretched thin by a fear that was as old as life itself, the fear of the dark. At the center of the spiraling nebula of light, the dais of the High Primarch Vorlag of the Cathar Imperium pulsed with a deep, martial crimson. His crystalline form, a monument of jagged angles and internal fire, was rigid with a fury that seemed to make the very air around him hum. The Cathar were a species born of pressure and conflict. Their philosophy was forged in the crucible of endless war, and they saw peace as a dangerous fiction, an interlude for sharpening claws and reinforcing armor. "It has consumed the Iridian colonies." Vorlag's voice was the grinding of tectonic plates, a sound that resonated in the bones of every being present. "Every soul, every city, every molecule of atmosphere, the system is now a dead stone, scoured clean and silent. Our fleets arrived to find only ghosts and the lingering radiation of an impossible energy signature. This silence that moves between the stars does not conquer, it erases." Opposite him, suspended in a shimmering column of ethereal blue light, was the luminary delegation. Elder Vela, a being of pure, coherent energy, swirled with patterns of deep concern. The Luminians were the architects of the conclave, their existence a testament to the power of harmony and contemplation. They perceived the universe not as a battlefield, but as a symphony, and this new threat was a dissonant chord that threatened to tear the entire composition apart. "Your fleets are the mightiest in this quadrant, High Primarch." Vela's voice was a chorus of soft chimes, a melodic resonance that usually soothed the most agitated minds. Yet they found nothing. The threat was gone before they could even strike. This is not a conventional enemy. It does not follow the known paths of warfare or physics. It appears, it consumes, and it vanishes. A third presence made itself known. A low, rumbling vibration emanated from the massive, obsidian platform of the Grawl. The Grawl were beings of silicon and slow time, their forms colossal and geologically patient. Their representative, a monolithic entity known simply as the Core Mind, communicated through precise, unadorned data streams that translated into a monotone, synthesized voice. Analysis confirms the luminary's assessment. The drive's signature is a paradox. It exhibits characteristics of instantaneous translocation without a discernible entry or exit wound in spacetime. The energy expenditure is astronomical, yet leaves no conventional wake. It is as if the universe itself permits its passage, bending its own laws to accommodate it. We have no weapon that can target such a phenomenon. We have no shield that can repel it. Vorlag's crimson light intensified. So we are to do nothing. Cower in our systems and wait for this asterisk plague to choose its next meal. The Imperium will not stand idle. We will double our patrols. We will burn entire sectors of space to create a firewall if we must. "A fire burns what it touches, Primarch," Vela countered, her light softening to a gentle violet. "But how do you burn a shadow? It will simply cross your firewall unscathed. We require a new strategy, a new way of thinking. We must pool our knowledge, our resources. All member worlds of the Conclave must be prepared to act as one." The debate swirled, a maelstrom of fear, pride, and ancient politics. Species that had been rivals for millennia were now forced to contemplate an alliance of desperation. They spoke of fleets and force projections, of shield harmonics and planetary defenses. And then, a minor delegate from a lesser system, a timid avian creature, posed the question that had been hovering at the edge of every mind. What of the human territories? They lie directly in the projected path of the next incursion. Their sector is vast, wealthy, and undefended. A profound stillness fell upon the chamber. Humanity. The name itself was a complex chord of emotions for the elder races. They were the Conclave's great experiment and its greatest shame. A species so young, so volatile, so terrifyingly adaptive that the Conclave had been forced to leash them before they could even truly learn to run. Vorlag's crystalline form seemed to sharpen, his light casting harsh shadows. The humans are a non-factor. They are a protected species, protected and disarmed by our own decree. He was referring to the Sol Accords, a document forged in the aftermath of humanity's brief, explosive entry onto the galactic stage. In what the humans called their first contact war, they had fought with a ferocity and a strategic genius that had shocked the established empires. They were outnumbered, outgunned, their technology generations behind, Yet they had inflicted staggering losses on the initial Cathar expeditionary forces sent to pacify them. They did not fight for territory in the way the Cathar understood it. They fought for an idea, for their very right to exist, and that made them unpredictable, dangerous. Faced with a species that could innovate new methods of destruction in the heat of a single battle, the Conclave had offered them a devil's bargain: entry into the Galactic community, access to trade, technology, and protection under the Conclave's aegis. The price was total demilitarization. The Sol Accords strictly, unequivocally forbade humanity from constructing or maintaining FDL-capable vessels designed for warfare. They were permitted vast fleets of commercial haulers, scientific explorers, and colonization ships, but not a single gunboat, not one frigate, not one destroyer. They were to be a species of merchants and thinkers, their martial spirit forever caged. "They are a liability," Vorlag continued, his voice dripping with contempt. "A ripe fruit waiting to be plucked by this new menace. We will have to divert our own fleets to defend them, stretching our lines thin. Their existence is a strategic weakness we can no longer afford." Vela's form shimmered with a complex, unreadable pattern. She had been one of the primary architects of the Sol Accords. She had seen the raw, untamed potential in humanity, the same chaotic spark that birthed galaxies, and she had feared it. She had argued that their aggression was a symptom of their youth, their isolation. By bringing them into the fold, by granting them security, she had believed they could be guided toward a more enlightened path. Now she was not so sure. Had she caged a predator, or had she merely declawed it and left it helpless in a jungle filled with far worse things? "The Accords were meant to ensure peace, Primarch," she chimed softly, "to prevent the humans from turning their astonishing creativity toward conquest. And in doing so, you have rendered them defenseless," Vorlag boomed. "Peace has made them soft, prosperity has made them weak. When the silence comes for them, they will offer it trade agreements and cultural exchanges. It will be a short negotiation." The Graal core mind interjected its cold, factual tone. "Data on human psychology is inconsistent. While they have embraced their commercial roles within the Conclave, their capacity for rapid adaptation remains a primary species trait. To assume they are helpless may be a logical fallacy. We lack sufficient information." Vorlag scoffed, a sound like grinding stone. "Information? I need no more information. I was there at the Battle of Cygnus X1 during their ridiculous War of Independence. I saw their primitive chemical rockets, retrofitted with stolen grav drives, ram our star cruisers. I saw their soldiers, clad in flimsy armor, hold a line against a full legion of my Imperial shock troops. They are not weak, Graal. They are insane, and we have forced that insanity into a bottle for a century, but the bottle is still just glass, and now a hammer is coming for it." His internal thoughts were a storm. He remembered the look in the eyes of the human commander they had finally captured. There was no fear, no surrender, just a cold, burning defiance. A promise. It had unsettled him more than any military defeat. The Cathar fought for glory, for territory, for the honor of the Imperium. The humans, he had realized then, fought for survival, and they made no distinction between soldier and civilian, between a warship and a hospital barge, if survival was at stake. Everything was a weapon in the right hands. "We must contact them." Vela's resonance cut through the tension. "It is their right as a signatory of the Accords. We will inform them of the threat, and we will dispatch a relief fleet to the Sol sector. It is our duty." The decision was made, though it sat uneasily with all present. A formal communiqué was drafted, couched in the condescendingly paternalistic language the Conclave always used with humanity. It was a message of warning, but also a reminder of their place, that of a ward, a child race to be protected by its elders. As the message was dispatched into the silent void, a profound sense of dread settled over the great chamber. They were all focused on the coming darkness, the chittering silence that consumed worlds. None of them considered the possibility that the greatest unknown in the galaxy was not the approaching storm, but the quiet, patient, and underestimated people who lived directly in its path. They were about to learn that while they had forbidden the humans from building swords, they had never thought to ask what they might be building with their plowshares. The reply from Terra came far sooner than expected. The Conclave had anticipated a period of panicked deliberation, followed by a formal, grateful acceptance of their protection. Instead, within a single rotation, a secure channel opened directly to the chamber. No secretary, no diplomatic aid, just a direct, encrypted link. A figure materialized on the central dais, a hologram of stunning fidelity. It was a human male, clad in simple dark gray attire that bore no rank or insignia. His hair was streaked with silver at the temples, and his face was calm, etched with the faint lines of a life spent in thought rather than conflict. His eyes, however, held a startling depth, a focused intelligence that seemed to see right through the grandeur of the chamber and into the hearts of the beings assembled there. "I am Ambassador Aris Thorn, speaking for the Unified Congress of Earth," he said. His voice was even, measured, and devoid of any discernible emotion. It was the voice of a philosopher, not a politician. "We have received your communique. We thank you for the warning." Vorlag's crimson light flared with impatience. "Your thanks are noted, Ambassador. We trust your people are preparing for evacuation to the designated safe zones. A Cathar protection fleet is already en route to your primary system to assist and maintain order." The ambassador's expression did not change. There was no sign of relief, no hint of gratitude. He simply inclined his head slightly. "The offer is generous, High Primarch, however it will not be necessary." A ripple of confusion went through the chamber. Vela's blue light wavered. "Ambassador, perhaps you do not fully comprehend the nature of the threat. This is not a pirate fleet or a rival empire. It is a force of extinction. It cannot be negotiated with or deterred." "We are aware," Thorn replied, his calm unshaken. "Our deep space observatories have been tracking the phenomenon for some time. We have analyzed the energy signatures, the patterns of consumption. Our assessment aligns with yours. It is a biological or perhaps biomechanical swarm intelligence, a predator of a galactic scale." The Grawl core mind rumbled. "Your data concurs with our own. Your sensor technology is impressive for a non-military power." "Knowledge is not a military asset, core mind. It is a universal one," Thorn said smoothly. "We have dedicated significant resources to understanding the universe we inhabit. It would be illogical not to." Vorlag could no longer contain his frustration. "Understanding will not save you, human. Your worlds are defenseless. The Sol Accords, which your people signed, guarantee your protection. To refuse it is irrational. It is suicide." For the first time, the barest hint of something shifted in the ambassador's eyes. It wasn't emotion, but a deep, profound stillness, as if he were contemplating a concept of immense gravity. "High Primarch, we have never once protested the terms of the Sol Accords. We have honored them to the letter. We have built no warships, no cruisers, no destroyers. Our fleets are, as you know, comprised of vessels for trade, exploration, and creation." He paused, letting the silence hang in the chamber. "But we believe we can offer assistance to the Conclave in this matter." Sheer audacity of the statement struck the delegates dumb. Vorlag let out a short, harsh burst of static that was the Cathar equivalent of a laugh. "Assistance? You will offer us assistance? With what? Your unarmed freighters? Will you attempt to bore the entity to death with your scientific treatises?" Ambassador Thorn remained placid. "We have assets that may be of use," he repeated, his voice still a perfect monotone. "With the Conclave's permission, I would like to transmit a live feed from our sector." A flicker of curiosity overcame the outrage. Vela gave a subtle pulse of assent. "Permission granted, Ambassador." The holographic image of Thorn dissolved, replaced by a view from deep space. At first, there was only the velvet black, strewn with the diamond dust of distant stars. Then from the darkness, they emerged. They were colossal. Larger than any vessel in the Conclave's combined armada, larger even than the Grawl's deep space foundries. But their size was the least shocking thing about them. They were not made of the cold, hard lines and metallic armor of warships. They looked alive. Their hulls were a pearlescent, shifting material that resembled something between polished bone and living coral. Vast, crystalline structures grew from them like forests, glowing with a soft internal light. Great, sweeping arms, reminiscent of cosmic nebulae, trailed behind them, swirling with captured gases and nascent matter. Greenery was visible through vast, transparent sections of the hull, entire ecosystems, biomes of impossible scale, thriving within these things. They did not move with the brutal thrust of engines, but seemed to glide through the void with an effortless grace, like leviathans swimming through a dark ocean. The chamber was utterly silent. The Grawl's platform began to vibrate at a higher frequency, a sign of intense, focused analysis. "The energy readings are extraordinary," the core mind stated, its voice laced with something that might have been awe. "They are self-sustaining. The primary power source appears to be a stable, localized singularity, harnessed with impossible efficiency. The hull is a biomechanical lattice capable of self-repair. These are not ships, they are mobile worlds." Vela's light was a bright, pulsing turquoise of wonder. "What are they, Ambassador?" she breathed. Thorn's voice returned, layered over the majestic image. "We call them the Arc class. Their primary designation is life seeders. Their purpose is creation." He began to explain. He spoke of how they could stabilize a failing star, using their immense energy projectors to reignite its fusion core. He described the great atmospheric processors, capable of transforming a toxic, dead world into a vibrant, oxygen-rich paradise in a matter of years. He detailed the gravitic manipulators, designed to gently shepherd rogue asteroids into stable orbits to form new planetary rings or to mine them for essential elements. He spoke of the nanofabricators, swarms of microscopic machines that could construct entire cities from raw planetary crust. Every function, every system he described was a tool of genesis, of preservation, of life. Vorlag watched, his crimson light a dull, confused flicker. He saw no weapons, no plasma cannons, no missile tubes, no fighter bays. He saw gardens and energy fields designed to nurture, not to destroy. "They are magnificent, Ambassador," Vela said, her voice filled with genuine admiration. "A testament to your species' focus on life, but they are not warships. They cannot fight." "That is where you are mistaken, Elder," Thorn said, and for the first time his voice carried a chilling weight. "A tool's purpose is defined by its user. We have spent a century studying creation, but to truly understand creation, one must also understand its opposite. One must understand how to unmake." The view shifted. The feed now showed one of the arcs approaching a large, barren moon. "Our gravitic manipulators designed to move asteroids can also be focused," Thorn explained. As he spoke, a beam of invisible force shot from the arc. The space around the moon seemed to warp and distort. The moon did not explode. It simply collapsed. It imploded upon itself, crushed into a super-dense ball of matter no larger than a small ship, the gravitational forces so intense that light itself bent around it. Silence. "Our atmospheric processors, which weave gases into breathable air, can also be reversed," Thorn continued. A cloud of iridescent fog, the nanoswarm, enveloped a second target, a decommissioned Cathar cruiser provided for the demonstration. The ship did not erupt in fire. It just dissolved. The fog of nanites swarmed over its hull, disassembling it molecule by molecule, reducing the entire warship to a cloud of drifting, inert dust in under a minute. A low, horrified hum filled the chamber. "And our primary energy projectors, used to restart the hearts of suns?" Thorn's voice was now as cold and vast as the space between worlds. "They can be tuned to a different frequency." The main crystal spire on the arc began to glow with an incandescent white light. A beam so pure and bright it seemed to be a piece of a star lanced out. It did not strike its target, another barren moon. It simply passed by it. But as it did, the moon's surface superheated, cracked, and then melted. The entire celestial body was turned into a sphere of molten slag, glowing with residual heat. The arc had not just destroyed it, it had unmade it, returning it to its primordial state. The feed cut out, returning to the calm, impassive face of Ambassador Aris Thorn. The conclave chamber was a tomb. The delegates, beings who commanded armadas that could crack continents, were frozen in a state of primal shock. They had spent a century thinking of humanity as a harmless, declawed pet. They had just been shown that the pet had spent its time in the yard not digging holes, but quietly building instruments of cosmic annihilation, disguised as gardening tools. Vorlag was the first to find his voice, a choked, rasping sound. You have violated the Sol Accords. This is a fleet of superweapons. You have been building warships in secret." Ambassador Thorn's expression remained unchanged. "No, High Primarch, we have not. I ask you to read the text of the accords you helped write. The treaty forbids the construction of vessels primarily designed for the purpose of warfare. The Ark class is not designed for warfare. Its primary purpose is, and always will be, the creation and preserve. Creation of life, we have not built a single weapon. We have merely learned that the tools of creation are universal in their application. A scalpel can be used to heal a patient or to kill one. The distinction is not in the tool, but in the intent of the hand that wields it." He let that sink in, the irrefutable, terrifying logic of it. "We honored the letter of your law precisely and completely. We did so because we understood its spirit, to prevent us from becoming conquerors. And we have not, but we never agreed to become victims. We knew, with the certainty of a species that has clawed its way out of the mud of its own violent homeworld, that the universe is not a peaceful place. We knew that one day a darkness would come that your treaties and your diplomacy could not stop. So we prepared, not by building swords, but by perfecting the plowshare to such a degree that it could serve as the mightiest sword imaginable." He looked directly at Vorlag, his gaze unwavering. "You were right about one thing, High Primarch. We are not weak. We are not soft. We have simply been patient. Now a threat has emerged that threatens all life, not just our own, and our mandate as creators is to defend life. We offer the service of the Ark fleet to the Conclave. We will stand with you against the silence. The choice is yours." The hologram vanished, leaving the stunned delegates alone in the vast, silent chamber. Vorlag stood motionless, his internal fires banked to a dull, smoldering ember. He had feared the caged beast's insanity. He had never once considered its genius. For 100 years, the galaxy had thought it was protecting humanity from itself. Now it seemed humanity had been preparing to protect the galaxy from everything else. The leash was an illusion. The cage had no bars, it had been a workshop, and the work was now complete. The first true test came sooner than anyone could have predicted. The silence did not follow predictable paths. It was a wildfire in the dark, leaping from one star system to another without logic or warning. It materialized at the edge of the Zephyr Confederacy, a sector rich in gaseous resources and home to a peaceful, silicon-based life form that dwelled in the clouds of gas giants. The Conclave's fleets were days away, their FTL drives, for all their power, still bound by the rigid laws of spacetime. The human orcs, however, were already there. They had not traveled through conventional space. Much like the enemy, they had simply arrived. The Conclave watched, their horror and fascination warring within them, through a live data feed provided by the humans. The view was a tactical display, cold and analytical, yet the scene it depicted was one of cosmic dread. The silence was a swarm of uncountable, smaller forms, a chittering, fractal tide of dark, chitinous craft that blotted out the stars. They moved as one, a single ravenous organism. There was no communication, no challenge, only consumption. Against this tide, the human fleet was a small, defiant constellation of soft, glowing light. The orcs, which had looked so majestic and serene in demonstration, now seemed impossibly fragile. They did not form a battle line as a Cathar fleet would have. Instead, they spread out, creating a wide, spherical perimeter around the system's primary gas giant, home to the Zephyri. They were not preparing to fight, they were preparing to operate. "They are being encircled," Vorlag muttered, watching the tactical display from the conclave chamber. The other delegates were gathered, their own projections sharing the communal sense of dread. "Their formation is wrong. It is a defensive posture with no route of retreat. Folly." But the orcs did not retreat. As the first wave of the silence swarmed in, the lead orc did something that defied every known principle of naval warfare. It extended its great nebular arms and activated its atmospheric processors, not in reverse but in their primary function. It began to draw in the rarefied hydrogen and helium of the upper atmosphere of the gas giant behind it. "What are they doing?" Vela's resonance was tight with anxiety. "They are refueling, now." "Negative," the Grawl core mind rumbled. "Are not storing the gases, they are repurposing them. The energy conversion is immense." On the screen, the space around the arc began to shimmer. The collected gases were being superenergized, ionized, and compressed into a state of matter that should not have been stable outside the core of a star. Then, with a silent, terrible beauty, the arc unleashed it, not as a beam, but as a wave. A nova of pure incandescent plasma, a miniature sun, erupted outwards. The front line of the silence vanished. Not destroyed in fiery explosions, but sublimated, their exotic matter instantly turned back into fundamental particles by the sheer, overwhelming thermal and kinetic energy. The wave of fire expanded for millions of kilometers before it dissipated, leaving a vast, empty hole in the enemy's formation. The silence paused. For a fraction of a second, the relentless, unified advance of the swarm faltered, as if the hive mind was attempting to process an event that its long history of consumption had never prepared it for. A starship that could exhale a sun. Before it could adapt, the other arcs acted. Two of them targeted the flanks of the swarm with their gravitic manipulators. There were no visible beams, only a sudden, violent warping of space itself. Entire wings of the swarm were caught in conflicting gravitational tides. Ships were torn apart not by explosions, but by the very fabric of reality being stretched and twisted around them. Hulls buckled, drives failed, and the swarming vessels were crushed into distorted wreckage or flung out into the void at relativistic speeds. It was a silent, bloodless, and utterly terrifying form of destruction. "They are not ships fighting ships," Vela whispered, her light a pale, awestruck blue. "They are cosmic forces fighting a plague." The silence was not a sentient army, it was a biological imperative. It did not know fear, only stimulus and response. It adapted. The swarm broke its monolithic formation, splitting into thousands of smaller, faster-moving groups to try and flank the human vessels, to get inside the effective range of their area of effect abilities. This was the moment Vorlag had anticipated, close-range combat. This was where traditional weapons, point defense systems, and armored hulls would matter. The arcs had none of these. They were, he thought, about to be overwhelmed. He was wrong. As the smaller swarms closed in, the arcs deployed their final, most insidious system, the nanofabricators. Clouds of iridescent mist, shimmering like oil on water, billowed from the ships. The swarms flew right into them, heedless. On the tactical display, thousands of enemy signatures began to blink out. There were no detonations, no energy flares, they just ceased to exist. The human feed switched to a micro-scale view from a drone inside one of the nanoclouds. The conclave watched as the swarming nanites touched the hull of a silence vessel. Instantly, they began to replicate, using the vessel's own matter as fuel. A gray, shimmering tide flowed over the ship, disassembling its hull, its power core, its biological components with cold, mathematical precision. Within seconds, the ship was gone, and the nano-cloud was visibly denser, augmented by the matter of its victim. "It is a self-replicating weapon," the Grawl Cormine stated, its monotone for once carrying an edge of profound disturbance. "A gray goo scenario, weaponized and controlled." The sheer processing power required to manage such a swarm without it going rogue is beyond our theoretical models. The battle, if it could be called that, lasted for less than an hour. It was not a clash of fleets. It was a sanitation. The humans were not warriors, they were exterminators, applying overwhelming, systematic force to cleanse a contagion. They fought without anger, without glory, without passion. Their communications, which the Conclave was monitoring, were a stream of calm, precise instructions, data readouts, and efficiency adjustments. They sounded like engineers optimizing a power grid, not soldiers in a life-or-death struggle. When the last of the silence vessels in the system had been disassembled by the nano-clouds or crushed by gravitic shears, the human arcs did not celebrate. They began their true work. One arc moved toward the system's primary star, its energy projectors beginning the delicate work of stabilizing the fluctuations caused by the battle's energy discharges. The others moved back toward the gas giant, deploying their atmospheric processors once more, this time to filter the residual radiation and inert matter from the planet's upper atmosphere, cleansing the home of the Zephyri. The nanoclouds, their work done, coalesced and were drawn back into the arcs, not a single rogue machine left behind. The conclave chamber was steeped in a silence more profound than any it had ever known. They had just witnessed a species they had deemed a backwater protectorate single-handedly defeat a galactic-level threat without suffering a single casualty, using vessels that were ostensibly for terraforming. Vorlag stared at the image of the arcs, their gentle lights glowing as they repaired the damage to the system, their actions as nurturing in peace as they had been terrifying in conflict. His entire worldview, his species' entire philosophy of power through ordained military might had been shattered. The Cathar built ships to crack planets. The humans built ships to create them, and in doing so had created something infinitely more powerful. The ultimate weapon was not a weapon at all. It was a tool of creation so advanced it could command the forces of the universe itself. He finally understood the look he had seen in the human commander. Eyes all those years ago, it wasn't defiance born of pride. It was a deep, unshakable certainty. The certainty of a people who knew that survival was not about having the sharpest spear, but about understanding the forest better than anyone else. Ambassador Thorne's hologram reappeared on the dais. His expression was as calm as ever, but his eyes seemed to hold a deep weariness, the look of a doctor who has just completed a difficult but necessary surgery. "The Zephyr system is secure," he reported simply. "The local infestation has been neutralized. We are restoring the system to its pre-incursion state." No one spoke. The silence was an answer in itself. It was a silence of awe, of fear, and of a complete, fundamental reevaluation of the galactic order. Finally, Vorlag's crimson light pulsed, not with anger, but with a new, somber intensity. He inclined his crystalline head, a gesture of respect so profound for a Cathar Primarch that it was historically unprecedented. "Ambassador Thorne," he said, his voice the low rumble of a distant avalanche, "the Imperium and the Conclave have misjudged you. We defined Warship by its fangs and its armor. You have taught us that the true measure of power is the ability to shape reality itself. We were wrong." It was not an apology. It was a concession. A statement of fact from a being who dealt only in the hard realities of power. In that moment, the Sol Accords, the document that had defined humanity's place in the galaxy for a century, dissolved into meaninglessness, not by law or by decree, but by the simple, undeniable truth of what they had all just witnessed. Humanity was not the Conclave's ward. They were its silent, watching guardians. A new era for the galaxy began in that moment of silence. The nullification of the Sol Accords was a mere formality, a quiet political footnote to a paradigm shift that had already occurred. Humanity, without ever asking, was elevated to a position of respect and authority that no species had achieved through conquest. Their arc fleet became the backbone of the new Conclave Defense Initiative, a shield against the silence. An alliance, forged not in the hollow halls of diplomacy but in the crucible of a shared existential threat, was born. Human engineers worked alongside the Grawl, sharing the principles behind their controlled singularities and self-replicating nanites. Human diplomats and philosophers engaged with the Luminians, discussing not treaties, but the ethics of power and the responsibilities of stewardship over life. And human strategists worked with the Cathar, teaching them that true victory lies not in destroying your enemy, but in making their defeat an inevitability, a logical conclusion to a problem you have already solved. Vorlag found himself in frequent conversation with Ambassador Thorn. The Cathar, a being of war, was fascinated by this species that wielded ultimate power with such profound reluctance. "You had this power for decades," Vorlag stated during one such exchange, the two of them observing a joint fleet of Cathar cruisers and a single human ark. "You could have shattered the conclave. You could have dismantled my Imperium. You could have become the rulers of this galaxy. Why did you not?" Thorn watched the ark as its energy field gently nurtured a new nebula into existence from interstellar dust. "Because the one who desires to rule is the one least fit to do so," he answered quietly. "We learned that lesson on our own world, through centuries of blood and fire. Power is not a prize to be won. It is a burden to be carried. We built the arks to carry the burden of creation, not to impose the burden of our will upon others. We only use them for defense because the greatest act of creation is the preservation of life that already exists." This philosophy was alien to Vorlag, yet it resonated with a deep, primal truth he was only now beginning to understand. The Cathar sought strength to dominate. The humans sought strength to protect. And in that simple, profound difference lay the gulf between an empire and a civilization. The war against the Silence continued. It was a long, arduous campaign. The Silence was a mindless force, but it was vast, a galactic infestation that had been growing in the dark for eons. Yet with the human arcs at the forefront, turning the very laws of physics into weapons, the tide was slowly, inexorably turned. Systems were saved, worlds were cleansed, and hope, a concept that had been dwindling, was rekindled. It was during the analysis of a captured Silence bioform, a command node larger than any seen before, that the final, terrible twist was uncovered. Grawl and human scientists, working in a deep space laboratory aboard an ark, managed to probe its inert, dead core. They were looking for a point of origin, a home nebula, anything that would tell them where the swarm had come from. What they found was not a location. It was a signal, deep within the Creatu. Ray's most basic genetic structure, encoded in a way that was clearly artificial, was a repeating sequence. It wasn't a control signal for the swarm. It was older, more fundamental. After weeks of tireless work, they decoded it. It was not a message of war. It was not a blueprint. It was a cry for help. Ambassador Thorn convened an emergency session of the new Conclave Alliance. The chamber was the same, but the atmosphere was one of partnership, not tension. Vorlag, Vela, the Grawl core mind, and the other leaders were all present, their projections focused on Thorn. "The Silence is not a natural predator," Thorn began, his voice heavy with the gravity of his discovery. "It is a weapon, a bioengineered terraforming agent gone rogue. Its original purpose, we believe, was to strip worlds of their existing biology to prepare them for a new, unknown form of life." A murmur went through the chamber. A weapon, a tool that had broken free of its masters. "But that is not the most significant discovery," Thorn continued, his calm demeanor finally showing a crack of deep, profound unease. "The encoded signal, it is a distress beacon. It is ancient, far older than any civilization in this conclave. It describes the creators of the Silence, a species that faced an enemy so terrifying, so overwhelmingly powerful, that they unleashed this plague as a last, desperate act of defiance. A scorched earth policy on a galactic scale." Paused, letting the implications settle. "The beacon was not intended for us. It was a warning left behind by the dying. It warns of the enemy they faced, an enemy that consumes not just worlds but entire realities." The tactical display in the center of the chamber shimmered, showing the known galaxy. "The beacon also tells us why the Silence has suddenly become so active after millennia of dormancy," Thorn said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "It is drawn to high-energy FTL travel. Our civilization, our trade routes, our fleets, our very existence has acted as a lighthouse in the dark, guiding it, but we have also guided something else." A new symbol appeared on the edge of the galactic map, a point of darkness, a void in the starfield that was not a nebula or a black hole. It was a patch of nothing, and it was growing. "The creators of the Silence failed," Thorn concluded. "Their weapon only delayed the inevitable. The enemy they fled from has arrived." The Silence was not the storm. It was the rain that falls before the hurricane. A new silence fell upon the great chamber. The victory they had just secured, the unity they had just forged, suddenly felt small, insignificant. They had united to fight a shadow, only to learn that the true monster was standing right behind it. They had prepared for a war of survival, but the entity now approaching from the intergalactic void did not seem to be interested in war. It was interested in erasure. Vorlag looked at the growing darkness on the map, then at the calm, resolute face of the human ambassador, and finally at the image of the Ark, the vessel of creation. He felt a flicker of the old Cathar battle fire, but it was tempered now by a new, human-inspired wisdom. They had faced a mindless plague and won. Now they faced the intelligent, ancient darkness that had engineered it. Their war was not over. It had just begun. And as he looked at the quiet strength of his new allies, for the first time in his long, war-torn life, the High Primarch of the Cathar Imperium felt something more potent than the certainty of his own strength. He felt hope. Hope that in the face of absolute oblivion, life in all its forms, armed with the tools of creation itself, would find a way.